that's our community, and that's a Joe Rogan community. That's not an NPR community, right? And the Republican Party, for their part, like I said, they're winning the vote despite their best efforts, not because of them. And I believe that to my core, brother. Somebody who's been very closely involved in Republican politics. The GOP has not figured this out. The GOP is getting these votes because the economic conditions created by the Democratic Party are so bad. That's what's going on. And so these people, what we're,
And and
go
and
jump
Mike, I'll jump in right now because you said something that I think for us we've talked about both the Republican Party by chance, and because of the situation at hand, stumbled into this. Welcome to the Political Maverick, the podcast that keeps you informed, engaged, and entertained on all things current events. Let's dive in. Welcome, everyone. The Political Maverick podcast back on. As always, Jaime Rojas, president of Rojas Public Affairs. We always have some great and amazing speakers, and today is no exception whatsoever. A good friend of mine for over 20 some years. We met back in Sacramento. And I think both of us had more hair and more black in our
Mhm.
hair.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, let me introduce you to Mike Madrid, good friend based out of Sacramento, but always seems to be all over the place in good places, especially in the world of politics. A fellow Republican. He's been definitely much more longer Republican than myself. I've been 20 years. You've been most of your career. But let me jump in and say, Mike, thank you again for jumping on without even hesitation. We appreciate it. Mike, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you've done in the past 30 years, and then we'll go on from there.
Yeah, well, first, Jaime, brother, it's been a long, long run. We're hitting that point in our career. We're talking 3 decades deep now. So,
Yep.
yeah, look, like you, I've been involved in the public affairs and political space for a very long time. We've crossed paths in all the best ways, many, many times over the years. I'm from Southern California. I'm from Ventura County. Grew up as a Mexican American Latino kid in the '80s, kind of the boom years of the Reagan years, and kind of this bright, optimistic, rosy picture of a time when the U.S. seemed sort of ascendant, and I was very much in love with history and politics, and wrote my congressman a letter back when I was a kid asking to volunteer. And this was at the time when political data was just becoming a thing. Before that, it was all intuition and gut sense, and who was a good advisor, and who had good
Right.
instincts. And so my career started there, and yeah, I started as kind of a pro business voice. I saw a future that didn't look good for our Latino community if we weren't more pro business and into job creation and creating pathways for the middle class. And in a lot of ways, that has unfortunately proven to be true. We saw a lot of this. We'll get into this in the November elections, where there's a frustration in our community about the economic situation. And this is not new. This has been going on for a very long time.
Right.
I think there's some real opportunities as things have broken. But in all candor and all truth, people need to know. I was a co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Very upset with the Trump dynamic in this party,
Right.
Republican Party. I care about my people, my community, and uplifting voices, being positive and optimistic. I think it's required of the character of our leaders,
Right.
and in that way, the Republican Party is sorely deficient. But having said that, both parties are not doing a good job.
Yeah.
I've
No.
been very clear about that, and that's been my career and the book I just wrote, and we'll talk about that too.
Mike, and we've talked about this often. I've heard many of your interviews, and we've talked about in campaigns and things of that nature. But you hit the nail on the head. Both parties are um, in a need of a shakeup. The
Hmm.
Democratic Party for sure. I mean, we just saw this past November election a complete shakeup all the way from the federal level down to a local level. California, as blue as it is, we saw a lot of red come out. Let's talk about what happened in the November election because I also want to talk about your book, but I think it'll lead to part of why you wrote the book and then the book that you're currently writing as well. So tell me some of the dynamics you've seen on what happened in November, and maybe a few steps back prior to that, looking at
Yeah.
Democratic and Republican parties.
Well, again, I occupy a unique space in politics. And the reason I say that is because I've done campaigns at the highest levels on both sides of the political aisle. And that's obviously very, very rare. Most Republicans don't talk to Democrats anymore, and Democrats don't talk to Republicans, let alone are they entrusted to do kind of some of these bigger races. So, I think when we first met, I was doing Latino stuff with George W. Bush's campaign nationally back in 2000, maybe 2004. And this was again, this was a path that the Republican Party was consciously choosing to go down. This Texas governor, very optimistic, extremely welcoming to Latinos, very seamless, very comfortable with our community, saw the best and the brightest and the potential of what we could be for the American idea, for the American experiment, and he was excited about it. You could tell. Loved Mexico, loved the partnership, wanted to build stronger relationships with the country. Again, I come from California, where Governor Wilson and the Republican Party was taking a very different direction as Republican. Proposition 187 was 30 years ago this year, brother. 30 years ago this year. That's how old we are. And to put that in context, about a third of all Latino voters are under the age of 30, which means a third of all the Latino voters in the country were not even alive during Prop 187. So they have no living memory of some of these anti illegal immigrant measures that really created the current political class. And that's important because 2024 really is the inflection point where the Democratic Party realizes, after 30 years of relying on Republican overreaching and anti-immigrant sentiment and some of the angry, divisive, I would suggest clearly racist rhetoric, that you can't just rely on that when people can't pay for rent, when the price of eggs, and I know a lot of Democrats are very dismissive of this and kind of roll their eyes and say, oh, people are willing to vote for a fascist because of the price of eggs. But when you're paying over 50% of your rent in 50% of your income in rent every month, you know what the price of eggs is. You know what the price of gas is. I grew up in a house like that. I grew up in a house where we were not paycheck to paycheck. We were not. We didn't quite make it to the next paycheck. So you had to scrimp and save and grind and somehow figure out how to add water to the milk and make one bowl of cereal into three.
I remember my mom being called a coupon queen. I mean, at the register, pulling out double coupons and seeing what's on sale and to make ends.
That's a real life experience for people. And if you don't understand that, and if you have the natural tendency to dismiss that or roll your eyes at that, it's because you live in a bubble and you are privileged enough to not have to worry about that. And so, this change, this shift has been coming for over a decade, Jaime. I wrote a book on it. I mean, I've been talking about it for a decade, as you know. Nobody was paying attention to me 10 years ago. Now suddenly everybody wants to, what happened? And it's like, this didn't just happen overnight. It's been going on for a decade, guys. And it started really nationally back in 2012, and into the midterms in 2014. Hillary Clinton starts to lose Latino support. Biden loses very significant support in 2020. And then in 2024, the dam sort of breaks. So, and what's very interesting is, we're Californians. In California, was kind of an outlier. It wasn't happening in California until the 2022 midterms. But the price and the affordability of life in California has gotten so out of control. We are now witnessing, and this is the takeaway. Sorry about the long wind up, but the main takeaway here is Latinos are rapidly emerging as an economic pocketbook voter and away from a racial and ethnic voter. And that's partly a story of assimilation, not afraid of that word. Partly it's afraid of the growth in second, third, and now fourth generation Latino voters. But primarily it's a cry for help from the working class that's saying it's broken and it doesn't work anymore.
And Mike, can I say, and I know, we've heard about, and I probably on my adult life, the sleeping giant. And I think you hit the nail on the head where we've become now so much part of the American culture. We've interwoven every industry, every part of American life that now we're like, hey, we're tired of it. If we can't put a roof over our heads, put food on the table, save and buy a home, the basic stuff, and have savings, well, what's the American dream? And the American dream right now is an influx, especially in California, where we have a governor who is actually in a bubble. I mean, look at that perfect hair and all the Aquanet he uses. But I mean, this is the component that we saw in the November election and the results of that, and the results in California. Tell us some of those numbers that we saw from people assuming outside of California it's all blue to a certain extent, but the red that came out.
Well, I think the first thing to understand is that, I mentioned this rightward shift started happening in 2022. So let's go back. This wasn't that long ago. This was just the last midterm. So let's go back to 2022. Something very interesting happened. Remember, this was on the heels of the debate between Gavin Newsom and Ron DeSantis from Florida. And what was really fascinating was Ron DeSantis got 57% of the Latino vote in his state as a Republican, the biggest numbers ever for a Republican. Far outpacing Trump, far outpacing every Rick Scott, everybody
Right.
who'd run, and Gavin Newsom starts to underperform in 2022. Brian Dolly, who's Brian's a friend and a good guy, but nobody knew who the hell Brian Dolly was. Starts to close the gap. He actually does better than any Republican since essentially Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was kind of an anomaly, right? He starts to tighten these numbers, and we start to see this movement in Latino districts, Latino dense precincts. And so I'm looking at this going, okay, wait a second. I'm watching these national trends happening. For 10 years, it's happening everywhere but California. But in 2022, something starts to break. This is right after the recall, where Latinos supported him, 75% overwhelmingly support him. But just 18 months later, they start to break in the other direction. And I'm like, okay, here it comes. Something's happening demographically. And then lo and behold, in 2024, you see Donald Trump do exceptionally well for a Republican, and it's still a long way to go. But the biggest rightward shifts happened in the most heavily Latino populated areas of the state. And so this shift, and again, Imperial County, there was a big surprise. A Latino Republican beats a Latino Democrat. Nobody was even paying attention.
Right.
This is the most Latino county in the state. Elects a Republican.
Right.
And it's down by the border. Border issues are a very serious thing. Defies conventional wisdom. You and I know Latinos have always had this consternation about the border. We're not all open borders, not even close.
But even then, jumping in agricultural wise, I mean, you're looking at like Central California that we know is very Republican, and that ag country, and you add the border component to it. I mean, we look
And
back.
crime.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, it's
And
all
you
the
look at those
issues.
numbers, all the issues there combined.
Yeah, and so look, and again, I'm a very big believer. Look, I'm a political consultant. You're a political consultant, but and so we do believe that campaigns matter. Of course they do. We've spent decades doing campaigns. They do matter. But I'm also a very big believer that demographics matter. I just don't think people really understand in our business demographics, right? When the demographics are with you, you say, "Oh, demographics is destiny." When they're not with you, you say, "Oh, those demographics are not destiny." It's like if you don't give a
Right,
damn about either party, like I really don't
right,
anymore.
right.
Like it's like demographics tell you about everything, right?
Absolutely,
Politics are downstream from culture. Culture is downstream from demographics.
absolutely.
If you understand the demographics, you know where the politics are going. And so this was, like I said, this is not a surprise to
No,
anybody paying attention. There's a lot of Democrats who are not paying attention nationally or in California, and suddenly woke up and are like, "Whoa, what happened? These Latinos, they're becoming, these right wingers, they're becoming MAGA." It's like this stuff was happening before Trump. Like this
right,
trend line began before he was even running for president.
absolutely.
But now suddenly you're paying attention, going, "Oh my God, what's going on? They're all machismo. They all want a fascist. They're all Catholic. They're all whatever. All of these things, none of which are."
Well,
There's some
the
strange.
machismo stuff, which is crazy because you're looking at Central and South America. How many women are presidents in
Yeah,
Central
in
and
my
South
book, and
America?
we'll get into this just a second, I dedicate a whole chapter dispelling this BS about
Right.
machismo. Look, to your point, there's no region of the world that has elected more women as heads of state than Latin America.
Absolutely.
One. Two, look at California. There's more Latinas
Hmm.
elected to the legislature than Latinos. Okay? We elect women nationally, not just in California. Latinos elect women at higher rates than we elect men to.
Right.
And our women are going to college, attending and graduating from college at far faster rates
Well, and
than our men.
and the
But
largest
that gap is
growing
bigger than any other ethnic group in America right now.
and the largest growing entrepreneurial segment is Latino women,
Are
which
women,
is
yeah.
crazy.
So we can go over every element to dispel this machismo trope, and that's
Right.
what it is. It's a lazy ethnic racial trope.
Right.
and it's gross, it's disgusting. It's a way to mitigate
Minimize.
us, to turn
Yeah.
us into savages, and to turn us into people who are less than. And it needs to stop. So I get a little bit passionate about it. Sorry about that, but
No,
like
no, no, no. I
I wrote a
agree.
whole chapter in the book saying this has to stop. You can't this has to be dismissed right now.
Mike, tell us now. I mean, you have these segments pieces that we just talked about. Tell us the
Yeah,
title of the book and then kind
yeah.
of concept of where the book came from and before as you were writing it.
How America's largest minority is transforming democracy. And it came from Simon and Schuster. Simon Schuster printed it. They backed it. They believed in the idea. We wanted it to come out before both conventions, so it came out in June of this year. And the timing couldn't have been better. I mean, it's like every. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. It's been really, really successful. I've been on a national tour, just living out of a. I thought it was gonna be a slow year because it's the first time in 30 years I'm not doing like a major national presidential campaign. This is busier than I've ever been, right? Because I'm explaining and literally providing a roadmap and going through all the detailed demographics, the generational breaks, Latino opinion over the past 30 years. Like I broke it all down, which is hard to do. It's a very complex thing. But I also did it in a sort of a memoir readable format so that you're not reading like a book, an academic book. It's very readable, it's very approachable. And and the book starts to explain that this rightward shift is it's coming, right? I didn't write it as much of as a prediction, although it all came to pass. I wrote it more as a warning to both parties. Like, you guys don't get it. And it's not a judgment. Neither of you guys are doing this right. This emerging demographic is really about aspirational blue collar working class issues with an ethnic sensitivity. And the Democratic Party has a real big problem with working class people right now, not just Latinos, but broadly everybody. And Latinos just happen to be the fastest growing segment of the working class. We are the non college educated blue collar worker. We work in the energy patch. We work on the assembly line. We work in the field. We work in construction sites. 1 out of 5 Hispanic men work in construction, residential construction. So, that's our community. And that's a Joe Rogan community. That's not an NPR community, right? And the Republican Party, for their part, like I said, they're winning the vote despite their best efforts, not because of them. And I believe that to my core, brother. Somebody who's been very closely involved in Republican politics. The GOP has not figured this out. The GOP is getting these votes because the economic conditions created by the Democratic Party are so bad. That's what's going on. And so these people, what we're
And and
go
and
jump
Mike, I'll jump in right now because I mean you said something that I think for us we've talked about both the Republican Party by chance, and because of the situation at hand, stumbled into this. The Democrats, especially in California, we've seen as left winging as possible in California. Just LA City Council, for example, have in a decade has I mean just went from moderate right leaning to completely left and even's gone down on the 180 to almost to a crazy number. But what let's use California as the example. What does and do you see both a Republican's resurgence as a party looking at us, and us meaning also us as political strategists, as well as the Democrats kind of figuring out in the next 2 years what mistakes they've done if they realize what that. Do you see both parties coming to any like aha moment, or is that going to take years on both sides?
It's going to take years on both sides because the one thing I have learned in my journey through politics in both parties, and again, I've always been a Republican since the day I turned 18. I never changed my registration, but I'm very comfortable working with Democrats. Anybody who's going to do anything to advocate on behalf of working class people and poor people, I don't care.
Right.
Like, I don't care. And people know that, and so I'm hired on both sides, and I think respected on both sides. And so and I talk to both sides constantly, and I'm proud of that. I mean, I've spent a lot of time cultivating that credibility. But here's the thing: what I have learned on that journey is both parties are not interested in what I'm interested in. They're not interested in helping people. They're interested in accruing power.
Right.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's the way the system works. The key is to incentivize power by helping out people that need it the most. If you're able to do that, then I think you can get some successes. And in California, I'm going to be real direct here. I blame the business community and I blame the Republican Party themselves for the hole that they got into. It didn't have to get this bad.
Right.
It did not have to get this bad. And that same reason, though, is why I don't think the Republican politicians will figure it out. They're going to become as right-wing, fire-breathing, anti-Mexican as possible in the next 6 months. That will happen. Now, you're not going to see 187 style protests. You're going to see a lot of Latinos standing up and agreeing with them. It'll be very different. But they are going to miss the opportunity in this big window that they have right now to lead on the economy and economic issues, and they're going to remind Latinos of who they are. Now, having said that, Democrats have the opposite problem. And let me talk about the Democrats in California, because this is going to change the whole nature of California politics for the next 25 or 30 years. Since Proposition 187, 30 years ago, 1994, the coalition in the Democratic Party has been wealthy, white, coastal progressives, college-educated homeowners.
Right.
Okay? And in California, if you're white, if you're college-educated, and if you own a home, life is really good. If for every one of those things you're not, it starts to get significantly worse. Okay? So you can literally go down by zip code and be like, if you're not a white zip code, if you're not a college-educated zip code, if you're not a homeowning zip code, life starts to get exponentially bad.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to say just like it's tough. It's
No,
bad.
bad. No,
Okay?
I agree.
And so the governing coalition in California has been Marin County, like people like Gavin Newsom, right? Who believe that California values are abortion rights and trans rights and gun control and legalization of marijuana. And there's no judgment. I agree with him on a lot of those issues, and that's fine. But you have never heard, ever, Gavin Newsom launch an aggressive plan to ameliorate poverty or develop a middle class aspirational economic agenda, because it's not one of their concerns.
Right.
Now, the other side of the coalition that they've worked with are younger, poorer, less college-educated Latino renters. And that coalition for 30 years has had one thing in common, and it wasn't economics, and it hasn't been cultural issues. The one thing in common that they've had is they both hated Republicans. You and I have lived that life, that experience, right? We're going, wait a second, if we don't take care of the economy, we're all going to end up with huge poverty rate numbers. Our schools are going to get worse. Housing's going to get out of control. I mean, I'm telling you stuff you already know. What is unique now is that glue is gone. Latinos are no longer anti-Republican just because. They're now saying, we're demanding some sort of redress on our economic plight and concern. And the question becomes, can those wealthy white coastal environmentalists and progressives and lawyers, doctors, highly educated tech workers, do they care enough to develop a blue collar economic agenda in California to keep their coalition together, or do they risk it all and losing everything by continuing to push Latinos into the Republican column to start building that economy again? And the last two elections have suggested that they're not going to make the adjustments any more than the Republicans are going to make the adjustments.
I'm betting on the latter there, Mike. I'm betting on the latter. I mean, look, we're in California where we have some of the most expensive property value in the country, where, probably we have 56 counties, probably a third of those are the most expensive in the United States, and beyond that as well. So where you have a liberal, and you're absolutely right, where it says, Black Lives Matter, gender, this, but the moment you have someone or a defund the police, hey, next door neighbor, the big lot where we can put in low income housing, all of a sudden that person just switches and says, not NIMBYism, not in my backyard. Yet so to a certain extent, in my opinion, we see many of this white liberal who changes their mask when it's convenient in disguising themselves as a for the people by the people because of a Democratic Party, and now switched over. So do you think the unions have played a big role here in California as well as in other parts of the United States? But do you think here are we going to be seeing a new Latino uh, politician coming out in regards to type of, not just particular one person, but type of that's like, enough's enough. maybe those coming from the in Central California or Imperial Valley or Orange County, down south. What's the new? What do you think is a look of a new elected official coming out in order to succeed and win?
A lot there, really good stuff. Let me start by saying, look, as a Republican, I'm very proud of the fact that when I saw sort of the stereotypical, racism of, the Southern, pickup truck driving, gun rack hoisting, Confederate flag waving guy, I would call that out, quickly and say, this is bad stuff. In the Democratic Party, that person looks like a, lawyer who's a land use attorney who lives in a coastal county, who's literally using the law and the legal system to prevent brown people from moving in. Which is more dangerous? Which is worse? Like, I can take on the dude, the gun rack guy. Like, I'm not afraid of that guy. I have in Lincoln Project. I'm not afraid of that. I don't know how much Yank with the lobbying community and the network that the other guy has to prevent doing what he's done. I don't say is going to do, but has done in California. There is no question that there is a nativist element to a lot of this sentiment, this NIMBY element, and it has created a two-class system in California. California is the most segregated state in the union by class and race as a result, because there's a correlation between race, ethnicity, and class in this state. No, and it's getting killed. It's getting squeezed. Right as Latinos are becoming the largest ethnic plurality, we're destroying the middle class. Is that a coincidence? I mean, is that a coincidence? I don't know. I tend to look at California, look at the policymakers, look at the policy, and say, especially if you're a Democrat and believe in government, how do you explain California? Like, how do you, with a straight face, say this is my party because they've created this? This didn't just happen. Most of this was man-made. It's a woman-made, man-made. It was created by policy. The good news is that can be fixed, and this gets to the answer to your question. Because we've gotten to this bad point, it means we can get out. But here's what it's going to require. It's going to require a Latino politician who gives voice to the Latino community first, who isn't trying to climb the Republican or Democratic hierarchy in the Republican Democratic ladders. That's going to happen. Let them both do that. But Latinos are, more than any group I have ever seen in my many years of looking at this, Latinos are rejecting both parties. It's benefiting the Republican Party right now because they had nowhere to go but up, and Democrats had nowhere to go but down. So we're seeing that it's looking like there's this massive pro-Republicanism. And the truth is there's very, very, very little data, very little polling. In fact, I haven't really seen any. And I look at this shit all day. Sorry, if you got to beep that out, you can beep that out. But if I look at Latino I look at Latino polling all the time. There is almost no evidence suggesting Latinos are becoming more conservative or more Republican. There's overwhelming evidence, overwhelming data to show that we are becoming more populist and rejecting both parties. And that's what's happening. And so when a Latino politician taps into that, I think you're going to see Latinos respond. That's why the subtitle of my book is How Latinos Are Transforming Democracy. That's what I'm talking about. The book is a critique. It goes into a criticism of both parties, what they're doing wrong, but also what they're doing right. Because each party is also doing something right. And whichever party can figure that out will be the beneficiary, and I'm arguing will be the dominant party of the next generation. What I don't want to do is I don't want Latino politicians to be let off the hook to just start saying, see, the Republicans were right. See, the Democrats were right. It's like, shame on both of you and shame on us if we allow that to happen. If people start advocating for the community, if they start advocating for blue-collar workers, if they start arguing and protecting and advocating for the least among us, the parties will come to us. We shouldn't be going to the parties anymore. That's the big mistake Latinos have made. We do not have to do that anymore. And that when we stopped doing that, and now we're almost at parity, almost at 50-50, look what's happening. Both parties are panicking and going, what can we do to fix this? What can we do to fix this? That's what you want. What you don't want to do is what our black brothers and sisters have done, which is be 85% Democratic Party. You're not going to get anything that way. You're not going to get anything. And so Latinos are now absolutely going to be the focus of campaigns for the rest of our lives, which is good for us. But it's important for us to articulate what the agenda is, what is appropriate, and what is not. And that's why I will continue to criticize both parties when they're wrong, either on economic issues like the Democrats or racial and ethnic issues like the Republicans.
Mike, I think you said it the best. I mean, our ideas, they're not static. They're always changing, and that's okay. As long as we're pushing and pulling for our community, and you said it here. I don't care if you're red or blue. I mean, people never asked me, are you Republican, Democrat? I'm sure they made the assumption just because I'm brown and live in California, I'm a Dem. But at the end of the day is, hey, can you solve problems? Can you do, can you bring people together? The most basics of things. And I was just talking to a group of business owners just a few weeks ago, and they're like, well, tell us what was the magic? I'm like, there's no magic. People just we've come for the American dream. We know we have to work hard. So what does that mean? We want the basics as anyone else. And that's the beauty about it. We're as American as anyone else. And I mean, the picture that you have on your book is the epitome of what Americana is. And I think once people believe that behind how we look like or our accents or where we're myself being Colombian, it just doesn't matter. We want as much as everyone else. We want jobs that are stable, that pay well, that we can pay our mortgage, or we can pay our kids' education, or we can pay for food on the table, the basics. And for you and I, we have work until death do us part. Um, Here now is the last question I'll ask from you on your book. What do you see? What do you forecast? And we'll stick to California because California is the anomaly, as we both know, anomaly on the situation. Where do you see the California Democratic Party going, and where do you see the California Republican Party going in the next 10 years?
I think the California Democratic Party is going to change much more than the Republican Party is, at least in the short term. And although they're both already are changing. Like the Latino caucus in the Republican Party is growing, right? There's a lot of Latinos elected this year. But let's put in perspective. This is a super minority party. You pick up one Latino, and that's like a cause for a parade.
Right.
So let's put it in perspective. Like don't calm down, right?
Right.
Chill out a little bit, right? Um, but it's a good sign, and I'm not going to take that away from them. And I'm talking to all of them. They all called, and said, "Can you help? We got some ideas." And then what's fascinating is I'll hang up the phone, and then the Democrats call. Mike, what happened? Can we call? Labor is calling, business
Right.
is calling, everybody's calling, phones blowing up, which is good,
Yeah.
right? I'm proud of that. It's like I worked 30 years. I wish this would happen 30 years ago. We wouldn't have all these problems.
Right.
But here we are. Right? Here's the moment. Democrats, and I spoke to the Latino Democratic Caucus, in California at their retreat at Disneyland, the Disneyland Orange County Resort there, a few weeks ago, and I told them, I said, look, I was in the same hotel 30 years ago, telling Republicans there's a demographic wave coming, and if you don't make the adjustments, you're in deep trouble. And I'm gonna tell you, there's a demographic wave coming. Latinos are totally different now. 80% of us are U.S. born. We're not immigrant voters anymore. You have banked the entire Latino political structure on immigration. It's not working. It hasn't worked for our community ever, by the way, ever. It's certainly not now that everybody's U.S. born and grandchildren and fourth generation great grandchildren are voters.
Yeah.
And they're listening to you going, "What you want to provide $150,000 in down payment assistance to the undocumented?" Like that was a bill that came out of the Latino caucus last year. It's like, what are you talking about?
Right.
Like third and fourth generation Gen Z kids who've been here for 150 years can't get a down payment for a house.
No.
You want to give the
Or cheaper
undocumented
education, or
a house?
yeah.
What are you doing? Like, go fix real problems. Like
Right.
the state is it's a wreck.
Yeah.
And but like I said, I appreciate. I honestly do. And I don't mean this facetiously. I do appreciate the sentiment. There is, I think, a genuine desire to help people. They just have been going about it the very wrong way. But I was far more well received, far more than I thought I would. In fact, there was this great interaction with Maria Elena Durazo, state senator who's a former head of AFL-CIO, and she said, "What does labor need to do?" And I was like, "We need to have a long talk because I want labor to be successful.
They
I
have to
don't have
be.
any enemies in this.
They have to be successful. I mean,
Labor can fix their own problems and the state's problems. Labor
absolutely,
can, but it's got to quit
absolutely,
using last century solutions for the new century's problems.
right.
That's what labor's got to figure out. And the fact that Maria Elena asked that, I'm proud of her, and I'm going to take her up on it,
Yeah,
and buy her lunch if I'm allowed to do that. I mean, I'm not a lobbyist, I don't know how it works, but I don't usually talk to politicians. But and say, I want to be helpful
right.
because if labor gets serious about this and starts to fight for and advocate for working class people, all working class people, not just labor. And keep in mind, Latinos have the lowest labor rate. We are the least likely of any race or ethnicity to be a member of a union. We have the lowest unionization rates of any ethnic group in the state. Labor is not that much different than corporations looking out for the interests of their shareholders. Labor's
Absolutely,
looking out for its members. That's the way it
absolutely,
works. And
absolutely.
that doesn't make them bad. It makes it real.
No, Mike, and we have a
So
problem.
anyway,
We have
my
a.
point is,
I was gonna say we have a problem in this
yeah,
country where just the middle class, talking about the middle class, is almost disappearing. In California, it's almost literally gone. Where labor can play a
yeah,
huge part in trades. Not everyone wants to go or
huge.
capable wants to go to 4 year college or institution. One, it's too
Yeah, and
expensive.
shouldn't.
Yeah, and where are the trades? The trades play. Everyone needs a plumber. Everyone needs an electrician. Everyone needs these
Yeah,
important
those are the
trades.
growth industry is. Yeah, those are
Firefighters,
real jobs with big money.
cops, and these unions play an important part to be able to educate the next generation to follow them. The backbone of this country to bring back middle class. It's a huge aspect of it, and we keep missing it. So if Maria Elena Duras was, hey, I want to be part of that luncheon. Maybe I'll cover it, so you don't have to
I
worry
love
about that.
that.
But I think they need to be part and sit on that table. They need to sit on that
Yeah.
table to be able to solve the problems.
Well, let's commit to this then. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll pull together 3 or 4 Latinos influential in the business community, yourself obviously included, and 3 or 4 influential Latinos from labor, Republicans, Democrats, and say, what do we define as a Latino agenda?
Right.
Like, I don't care about labor and businesses agenda. I've been doing that for 30 years. I've worked on both sides. I can tell you what they both are. I can tell you why the fights are going to end up the way that they're going to be. But the truth of the matter is, there's one constituency right now that doesn't have an advocacy voice, which is the middle class, which is fighting for it, and it happens to be Latino. And we've allowed that to happen as Latinos. We've allowed that to happen because we have so doubled down and leaned into the agenda of a coalition ally that was not looking out for our economic interests or economic concerns. And that has not benefited us. We
Mike,
have huge economic challenges.
Mike, you and I have a responsibility, I think, and not I think, I know we have a responsibility to be able to lead that charge. I think with what's happening here, and I think with us being able to take that leadership, anyone calls us, it doesn't matter, Republican or Democrat, but at the end of the day, it's about the community. What do we need? How do we solve problems? And that's what we do best. We're firefighters in the political world. How do we solve these problems? We'll sit. I think I'm in. We'll set up that meeting with the key leadership that can bring us together and find solutions because it's not going to be our current governor. He's busy doing his own thing and out of sync with the realities of California, let alone the realities of America. But I think California can set the tone for the rest of the country. And I think us as as who we are as political mavericks, as is finding that solution, and it's not that hard. I think it's just right there, being able to communicate with us. So I'll take that challenge with you. We'll go and do that. I
I
think
love it.
it's necessary,
Let's do it.
because if not, who's going to do it? It's we're passing the buck. We can't do it. So I'm
That's
in.
it. Let's
We'll
do it.
we'll figure it out. And Mike, as always, brother, thank you for always leading the charge. You've always been there. You've never changed. And that fight is important because all of us need that, and I'm there with you. I think that in order for our community to be able to move forward, in order for us to be heard, we need uh, people like ourselves to be also engaged and fight. There's the basic needs. Everyone has basic needs, and that middle class, that working class, is the backbone of this country. So, Mike, first and foremost, thank you for joining the Political Maverick podcast,
Yeah. Thanks for
as
having me.
always. But
Yeah.
besides that, congratulations on being the leader that you are. Congratulations on the success of your book. it's no surprise to myself or anyone else that know the work that you've done in the past 30 plus years. Congratulations also on your kids as well, on college and beyond. So we're I know, trust me, my little one
Getting
graduates
old is
this
what that
year.
means. Congratulations on getting old.
Exactly. And wiser, just like some good wine. Brother, thank you for everything you've
Yeah,
done. I appreciate your time. It's extremely valuable to us, and we appreciate it. We'll talk soon, and hopefully we'll see you soon,
abrazos
and abrazos as well. But we're in for that get together for the luncheon, and getting the leadership
for
that needs to
sure,
be out
for
there
sure.
to figure out what the next game plan is going to be. Mike, thank you. Love you, brother. I
Let's do it.
appreciate it, and then we'll talk soon. Thanks for tuning in to the Political Maverick. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and X for updates. Catch every episode on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and Amazon. See you next time.